Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss about a generics in a C sharp. So what is generics in a C sharp? First of all, the generics in a C sharp is the technique which allows us to write a class or a method that can work on any data type. So if you want to make your methods independent in terms of data types, so our class we can use the generics. So we can write a specification of a class or a method in substitute parameters for each data type. When the compiler encounters a constructor for the class or the function call for the method, it generates the code handled for that particular specific data type. So this is what a generics in a C sharp. So how to create a generics? If you want to create the generics in a C sharp, just we have to mention it is similar. It is similar to the templates in a C++, which makes us to define methods independent, data independent methods, so which will work for any data type. So in a C sharp we can define, along with methods we can define a class as a generic, that is a class which can work on any data type. We can define the methods also, we can define the delegates also using the generics. So what is the use of a generics? First of all, it helps us to maximize the code reuse, means code reusability, then type safety, and the maximize the performance of your application. So along with, as I told, along with the methods in a C sharp we can create our own generic interfaces also, a class also, events, and a delegates also we can define it as a generic. And the .NET framework has added this feature from the common language runtime CLR 2.0. All the versions up to 2.0 having the uh, functionality of a generics, and all the classes related with the generics in a C sharp are added in a namespace called as system.collections.generics. Collections.generic. In this namespace all the classes, inbuilt classes, so we can define our own class also. So for this we will create one project. So I will create a project with the name of a generic study. So this is our project. First of all, we will define one class as a generic class. Normally, just we'll add one more class to our project. I will give it as a name as a generic class. So first of all, to define a generics, or to make a class as a generics, or a method as a generics, or a delegate as a generics, we have to use the angled brackets. So inside this angle bracket we have to define the a name for your generics. Normally in a standard programming we use it as a t, so you can use any name as per your convenience. So we are giving a generic class with a generic t. So first of all we will define one variable, a public variable of type t with the name generic variable. Then we will define a constructor for our class as a public generic class, and for this we'll define one parameter of type t with the name value, and in this we're assigning that value, incoming value. We'll use one output statement, console dot write line in constructor value is plus, we'll print the value of generic variable. So this is our constructor. Normally we have not mentioned any data type while defining a variable, or while defining here, while defining parameter in your parameterizer constructor, while defining a variable also we have not mentioned any data type. So just we are defining its of type this generic t. So then one more, we will take one more method as a public, which will return the value of type t. We will give the name as a generic method, and it accepts a value, or it has a parameter of type t value, and we are returning that same value. I will perform some operation. We'll define one variable, t is equal to sqr, and sqr is equal to value into value. Now we are returning square. So this is method. Then we'll create the object for this class. So what is difference in a generic class and normal class? While creating an object for your generic class, so our class name generic class, we have to mention the type on which your class will work. So I will mention it as integer. I will create object as a gc is equal to new generic integer. To the constructor of a class, my class, I will pass the value as a 10, and console dot write line will call to gc dot generic method. We will pass the value again as a 10. Then again console dot read key. So now we'll save our program. We'll try to execute it. So it's showing some errors. So we can see, we'll see what is the errors. The operator star cannot be applied to operands of type t. So we cannot perform any arithmetic operation directly on our generic variables. So we can use those variables. So just we'll remove this. We'll remove all the code. Just we'll write only one sentence, return the incoming value. Okay, so one more thing, save it and execute it. Now you can see in a constructor the value is 10, and in generic method it's 10 again. So we'll write one message over here as in a generic method value is okay. Now we will create one more object of a generic class as a float. We'll create object as a gc1 is equal to new generic object float. We will pass the value 56.45f, and again we will take that sentence as to call right line method. We'll copy this plus gc1 dot gc1 dot generic method. So to this method we will pass the value 34.23. So now we'll save it and we'll try to execute. So this is how a single constructor of a class can work for a different type of values. So first call we are passing integer value to the constructor and again integer value to the generic method. In a second object we are passing the float value to our constructor and to our generic method also. This is how we can, using generics, we can create a class which will work for any data type instead of binding a class constructor or a class methods with a specific data type. We are defining those that method which will work for any data type. This is how we can define a generic class in a C sharp. Now how to define the generic method which will work for different values? First of all, for this also we will take one more class, or within the same class, okay, within the same class, generic class, we will define one method, or within the program class only we will define a static method, or static void swap integer a comma integer b, then we will take one variable of type integer t to swap the values. So t is equal to a is equal to b, and b is equal to again t, and the console dot write line after swapping a is equal to parameter 0 and b is equal to parameter 1 double quote not complete comma a comma b. So this is our swap method. Now here from the same class only we will call to swap method swap. So we can see it will work on only integer value, so we need to pass the integer value. So we'll pass the integer value, or we'll define one two variables. Integer a is equal to 10, integer b is equal to 20. We'll print one message also, console dot write line before swapping a is equals to parameter argument number 0 and b is equals to argument number 1, then a comma b. Then we'll call to swap method. Now we'll execute this. So now we can see these are the values before swapping 10, 20, and after swapping 13 and 12. Something is missing. So let's see what is the problem. Okay, we are not passing that values. We will pass the values a comma b here. So save it. Now we can see before swap a is equal to 10, b is equal to 20, and after swapping a is equal to 20 and b is equal to 10. So this is how this swapping method will work for only integer value, but I want to make this method to work for any value that I will pass at the time of calling only. So for this purpose, just while defining this method, just to mention a generics before that method, and here while mentioning that variable of a specific type, define those variables of type your generic as a t. And here also to swap it, just define a temporary variable also of type t. So we can see while calling this method, now we'll change it, swap it will ask you for which data type you want to work. Just I will pass now integer, and now I will pass the value a comma b, so it will work for an integer value. Now we'll take one more variables, two variables, a double variable, double d comma, sorry, double c comma d. C is equal to 12.45 and d is equal to 23.67. Now again we'll print the message. Just we'll print the value in a variable names as a and b only. So before swapping, so we'll print the value of c and d here, and call to swap method by passing it as, it will work for the double, and now I will pass the value c and d. So we'll see we have a same swapping method for both integer variables and for the double variable also. So we'll execute it and we'll see. So clearly we can see that our swapping method will work for any data type, that the data type which we are mentioning here while calling that method, it will work on that particular data type. So we'll try with one more variables of type float. So we'll define one variable, two variables of type float. Again here a float f comma g, and f is equal to 23.56 f and g is equal to 45.45 f, means a floating value. So again I will print the same message before swapping, and then we will call to swap method by passing a value for generic as a float. It will work for a float value, and we will pass the value f comma g. So now we'll try to execute it again. Okay, it's showing the value of a and b because we have not changed the variable names here. It's f, it's a value of g. So save it, execute it. So we can see this is how our a single method can work for a multiple data types. This is the use of generic. This is how we can make a method as a generic. Rather than it work for a single data type, we can make a method which will work for any data type. So while defining that method within the this angled bracket, just we have to here, we have to mention only the generic. So we can take any name. If I am taking as it is, so you can take your name also, you can take. So just what you are mentioning the name of a generics, you have to use that generic name throughout the whole program the same. So this is how we can create a generic methods. We have seen how to create a generic class. This is how we can create a generic class. This is how using this we can create a generic method also. Now it's possible to define a, it's possible to define a generic constructors also. For this purpose we will take new project, we'll stop execution of this project, we'll create a new project as console application. We will make this name as a generic delegate. So we know the definition of a delegate. Delegates are of type reference. We have studied it in the last video lecture also. We have seen uh, how delegates works and for what the delegate works. Delegates works for another method which having the same signature in the sense same return type and the same parameter list. So we'll try to implement a generic which will work for a method with the same signature in terms of parameters only, not in terms of a return type. So it will return a value of any type, but it has the same matching parameter list, so it will work. So for this we will define a delegate we'll take our same delegate number changer. So while defining this delegate, we have to mention the type here, and we will take the variable of type t only as an. So this is how we have defined our delegate, which will return the value of type t and which will work for the value of type t. So now basically the delegates works for the method which has the same syntax as your delegate, a same syntax in terms of that return type and in terms of the parameter list. So we will define one method, a public, a static method of type integer as a add num, which would work for the integer data type only as a p or integer variable only. So we will define one static variable also, a static double number is equal to 10. We'll take the value of the static variable double as a 10. So inside this, number plus equals to p and returns the value of number. So we will take one more method, a public static, which will return the double value with the name mult number, which will work for a double variable, and here number is equal to, sorry, no, number is equal to number into p, and again it returns the number. We'll take one more method, public static. So this is our delegate, which will return the value of type t, which will work for the variable of type. So we have taken two methods with the two different return types, integer and the double. So in previous in the study of delegates we have studied, if you are defining a delegate which returns the value of type integer, so that delegate must and should be work for only those methods having the return type of integer and having the same parameter list. So here we are defining a delegate with the generic type t, and we are defining two different methods. One will return the value of type integer, one will return the value of type double, one will work for a variable of type integer, and one will work for the variable of type double. So through the delegate we are going to execute this method. So for this purpose, first of all we will create the object for our delegate number changer. So while creating an object for your delegate, it will ask you here, at this point it will ask you to mention the type on which you are going to work. So I will mention it as integer nc1, nc is equal to new integer, and to this delegate now we need to pass the add num. So because this delegate will work for integer and the add method is with of type will return the value of type integer, so we are passing. So again we will create one more a number changer object which will work for a double. So nc1 is equals to new number changer double. So to this we will pass our multiplication method because it returns the value of type double. So we'll try nc, we are passing the value as a 10, console dot write line, get num, nc1 will pass 20, again console dot write line, at the last console dot read key method. So we'll save this, we'll try to execute. So I think so there are some errors. Cannot implicitly convert the type double to an integer. Explicit type conversion exists. Where? Here. Because this method will return the value of type integer and the number is a variable of type double. So we need to cast this into type integer. So we'll cast it as integer. We'll save this. We'll try to execute now. So we can see the output to the screen is 20 and 400. So we will see how it is 20 and 200. So here the 20 will work for nc will work for the add method. So we are passing 10, so 10 plus 10 will be 20. Good, no problem. Then we are passing, so value of num is now 20, so we are passing again 20 using nc1 for the multiplication number, so it will be 400. This is how we can create a delegate of type a generic tag delegate which will work for any data type, any method which will return any type of a value. So just while defining it, just to have to write the syntax, we have to make that delegate as a generic. Here we have to, in an angled bracket also we have to define. So this is how we can create a delegates of type generics also. And these are the three scenarios where we can using generics. In a C sharp, we can create a class of type of generic, we can create a method of type generic, and we can create the delegates of type generics. As like this, we can create our interfaces as a generics, we can create our events as a generics also. This is all about a generics in a C sharp. Thank you.